I'm Randy and I make candy, and today I'm making salted caramels. Stick around. Greetings, my confectionery cavaliers, and welcome to Randy Makes Candy, where I help you make tasty treats that people love to eat. As I said, today I'm making salted caramels. This is at the request of a longtime friend of mine, so thanks for the suggestion, Rick. If there's something you'd like to see me make, please let me know in the comment section. After the recipe, I'm going to talk a little bit about the science that explains why heat plus sugar equals awesome, and I'm going to share my attempt at the absolute easiest caramel making method I've ever seen. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Speaking of sharing, if you like what's happening here in the Candy Kitchen, please like, subscribe, and share. Let's start with some caramel trivia. I'm sure you're familiar with Milton Snavely Hershey, founder of the Hershey Chocolate Company. That's not where he got his start, though. At the age of 14, he was apprenticed to a confectioner to learn the candy-making trade. 12 years later, he'd learned enough to strike out on his own and formed the Lancaster Caramel Company. A decade or so later, a trip to the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago sparked an interest in chocolate. He sold the caramel company for $1 million, a lot back then, created his own formula for milk chocolate, and began construction on what was to become the world's largest chocolate manufacturing company. So when you hear the name Hershey, you should think of caramel as well as chocolate. Okay, let's make this happen. First, what do you need to create this? Don't worry about writing it down. The ingredients and amounts are listed below. You can also find this information at randymakescandy.com. I've based today's recipe on one that was discovered a few years ago by Renee Eisenblocker of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She claims to have found a handwritten recipe for caramels in the old garage behind her home. The recipe was in an envelope labeled MSH Shuttleworth Caramel, and it's believed by some that MSH stands for Milton Snavely Hershey. Huh? See? There was talk of doing a forensic handwriting comparison of the recipe to some documents known to have been written by Hershey to see if he was actually the author. This really sparked my interest because forensic handwriting comparison was my bread and butter for about 25 years. But I can't find anything to indicate if that ever occurred. If Ms. Eisenblocker and the Hershey Company want to send me some documents, I'll see what I can do. No charge. The only differences between what I'll call the MSH recipe and the one we're doing today is that I'm adding a little water, which helps the sugar dissolve more evenly and reduces the chance of burning, and the MSH recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fresh gum. And no one seems to know exactly what that is. If I were to guess, I'd say it's gum arabic, which is a thickener and emulsifier used a lot in the food and drink industry. It's also used in the paint, shoe polish, and cigarette paper industries. Regardless, it ain't going in my caramels. Sorry, Milt. Anyway, let's get moving on the caramel recipe that may or may not have come from Mr. Hershey. Ingredient-wise, you'll need 1 tablespoon of vanilla paste or extract. I'm using the paste today. Vanilla paste has the same vanilla flavor as a good extract, but it's a little sweeter due to some added sugar. Plus, it has little vanilla bean flecks, which can kind of give the final product an upscale look. Paste is a bit of a misnomer, though, as it's more of a viscous liquid. By the way, viscous liquid is my next band name. You'll also need 72 grams or 5 tablespoons of butter, 1 teaspoon of salt to go in the caramels, and another ½ teaspoon of salt as a topping, 85 grams or 1/4 cup of light corn syrup, 60 grams or 1/4 cup of water, 292 grams or 1 1/3 cups of sugar, and 240 grams or 1 cup of heavy cream. You'll also need a large saucepan, a bowl, an 8x8 baking pan lined with greased parchment paper, a wooden or a silicone spoon or a spatula, and a candy thermometer. You can see the thermometer I use in my toffee video. It's not a bad idea to have a bowl of ice water standing by, just in case you get a bit of this molten mixture on you. I've never done it, but then I consider a molten caramel scar the Candy Kitchen equivalent of a dueling scar. Okay, let's make some candy. Cut the butter into a few pieces, then combine that with the vanilla, 1 teaspoon of salt, and the heavy cream in a microwave-safe bowl. Heat it in the microwave for a minute or so until the butter has melted, and then set it aside. Place the corn syrup, water, and sugar in the saucepan and stir it just enough to get the sugar mixed in. Heat it over medium heat until the sugars come to a boil, then cover with a lid for about a minute. The steam causes any sugar that may have stuck to the sides of the pan to melt and fall back into the boiling sugar. This helps prevent crystallization. Remove the lid and attach a candy thermometer to the side of the pan. Cook for another 5 to 10 minutes until it reaches a temperature of 320 degrees Fahrenheit. You should see a nice amber color. The moment the sugar reaches 320 degrees Fahrenheit, remove it from the heat. Slowly and carefully pour in the cream mixture while stirring. It's going to bubble like mad. This is the part where you either congratulate yourself for choosing a large pan or curse yourself for choosing poorly. Adding the cream mixture will cause the temperature of your caramel to drop. Put the pan back on the heat and continue cooking for another 5 to 10 minutes until the caramel reaches a temperature of 240 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the softball stage and will create a soft caramel. If you want slightly harder caramels, bring the temperature closer to 245 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the firm ball stage. As soon as the caramel reaches your desired temperature, pour it into your pan. Now, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You may have graduated from Cambridge or the School of Hard Knocks. Regardless, when you see how good this looks, you are going to want to taste it. The heavenly concoction on that spoon is going to be calling out to you, "Taste me, taste me." Resist the temptation. Otherwise, you're going to spend the next half hour with your tongue in that bowl of ice water. Let your candy rest on the counter for 20 to 30 minutes, then scatter the salt over it. I'm using fleur de sel here because I like the way it looks, but you can use whatever you have on hand. Then let the caramel cool on the counter for an hour, then place it in the fridge for an hour. Or you can do like I did and just let it sit on the counter overnight. When it's cool, cut it into whatever size pieces you want. It'll be easier to cut if it's cool, like refrigerator cool. So if it starts to get too soft, stick it back in the fridge for a bit. When it's cut, wrap the pieces up. I'm using some cellophane that I had in the pantry, but waxed paper will work just as well. Okay, let's try one. Remember how I said these were soft caramels? That's very soft caramel. Here we go. Slancheva. Sweet, creamy, caramelly. I mean, just amazing, silky, smooth mouthfeel. That's just, excuse me. That's just delicious. That is just fabulously good caramel, and I'm not even a huge caramel guy. That is really good. Okay, put your thinking caps on because it's about to get sciencey in here. Actually, I'm going to keep this simple because chemistry is definitely not my strong suit. Besides, scientists have been doing research on caramelization since the late 1700s, and even they don't fully understand it, so what chance do I have? Anyway, what we call table sugar or granulated sugar is more properly called sucrose. It's made up of two simple sugars, glucose and fructose. The application of heat breaks the chemical bond that holds those two simple sugars together. It isn't until that bond is broken that melting occurs. This is followed by a condensation step in which the individual sugars lose water as steam and react with each other. As this process continues, a bunch of volatile chemicals is released, which produces the complex combination of flavors we know as caramel. Please indulge me for a moment while I read off a few of them. There's diacetyl, which is mainly responsible for the buttery or butterscotch flavor. Side note, if you use brown sugar instead of white sugar, you get butterscotch. Maybe we'll do that someday. Esters and lactones are produced, which have a sweet rum-like flavor, along with furans, which are a bit nutty, and maltol, which gives it a toasty flavor. In addition to that, free radicals are produced, which is part of what makes caramel sticky. Who knew that the simple caramel was, in actuality, more complex than Warren Buffett's tax return? Finally, I saw something recently that I had to try. It was a recipe, I hate to even call it a recipe, that promised great caramel flavor without all the equipment and the melting and the stirring. The instructions were to heat your oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, put a few sugar cubes on a baking pan, and leave them in the oven for 3.5 hours. And that's it. The idea is that the lower temperature with the longer cook time breaks down the sucrose, but never gets to the melting stage. It goes straight to caramelization. So I tried it, and about an hour later, everything had melted. Thinking about it, it made sense, because 300 degrees Fahrenheit is the hard crack stage, as we learned in the toffee video. So I tried it again at 250, which is the hardball stage. After 3 hours, they were still almost pure white. After a few more tries, I ended up at 265 degrees. Over the course of my experiment, I discovered that the cubes seemed to be heating unevenly, so I flipped them and rotated the pan numerous times throughout the 3-hour cook time. Even with that, I had some cubes melting and some hardly toasted, and the caramel taste was barely noticeable. It mostly just tasted like a sugar cube. I fail so you don't have to. If you figure out a way to make this work, please let me know. I was thinking that an insulated pan or even a silpat might have helped them to bake more evenly, so you might start there. If you enjoyed our time together, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out. I'd love to hear about your results if you try this recipe, the caramel, not the sugar cube. Oh, that too. As well as suggestions for what you'd like to see in future videos. Fun fact, the words caramel and caramel are not interchangeable. Caramel is a noun that refers to the candy or its color. Caramel or caramel is a proper noun, either the name of a person or a place. And now you know. I hope you'll join me next time. Thanks for the suggestion, Rick. If there's something you'd like to see me make, why can't I do this? Vanilla paste has the same vanilla flavor as a good extract, but it's a little sweeter. Ingredient-wise, you'll need 1 tablespoon of vanilla. Paste is a bit of a misnomer though, as it's more of a 60 grams or 1/4 an 8x8 baking pan. A baking pan. Anyway, what we call table sugar or remove the lid and attach a remove the lid. No, just stop. Anyway, let's get moving on the caramel recipe that may or may not have come from Mr. Hershey. Mr. Hershey. We were doing so well.